It's the balance thing that really matters. So at the end of the day, if you can't stay balanced, you can't stay upright, you can't compete. And so when your balance shifts too far to the other, and that's why rarely when you talk about structure, it's like CPO, your head or chief of marketing, and sales, right? That's really your true business balancers. And then those roles have to run down throughout the company to support the actual operating model itself or the economic decision-making cycle, right? More importantly, that part of your operating model, really how you ultimately kind of go concept to cash and make the type of decisions you really make. Because if those long-term, short-term, because they're different, right? Marketing's long, sales is short typically, and CPO is both long and short, like they're synthesizing. So if you don't have that structure kind of running down inside of your company, at least at the front end of your economic decision-making cycle, you're going to chase a lot of shadows. You're going to get really, really, really unbalanced. And I think that's the trick, is finding the right people with the right skills at that level to be able to play those two types of roles. And I think that's why too startups struggle too, because it's like it's hard for one person or two people to necessarily think long and short at the same time.
We run into this too. The executive or the team really that's been with the company for 20 years. They're amazing at what they do, but then injecting a new idea can be challenging. What's interesting is sometimes they'll intellectually absorb it, but executing on it is a whole other thing. They know all the words, and in a conversation, you're like, oh, yeah, you're good. And then you're like, you didn't do any of those things. But yeah.
True.
So I guess, one last question here is, what would you say to a CEO who suspects they're running blind into this kind of stuff? Like, what's some practical advice you might give somebody like that?
So I think CEOs are generally really smart, highly motivated individuals, and they can't do it all. And they don't know it all, even though they have to kind of pretend they can and think they do, like a lot of the times, right? It's an extremely challenging role to be in. A lot of people sort of take it for granted and sort of like think it's like a really cushy place, but like you just haven't been around enough to know it's probably the most uncomfortable seat in the entire building, right? Which is why they get paid what they do. But so when you usually, in my experience, when they think that something's wrong, they're usually able to put their finger on it. But what they usually can't do is they can't diagnose it. So the first thing that I think it's really important is if you haven't gotten this far because you're not smart, most CEOs I know are analytical, but they're also highly intuitive. It's usually a match. And so if you think it's happening, it probably is. If you're not sure that you don't understand what it is, call somebody to come take a look. Because that's when you want to go in, because going down and trying to get the honest answer from your position is going to be almost impossible, right? People are going to kind of tell you what you want to hear. There's going to be all these silos, all these stovepipes of conversation. You're going to be very used to hearing what you hear back. A lot of it's probably not going to be super truthful because nobody knows how to kind of tell the truth about the things they already don't know how to do. It's not their fault. They just don't know how to do it, right? So they don't have that perspective. So, I mean, that's really kind of when you have to call somebody to come in and analyze it for you and sort of break down the problem from a third-party perspective. Some people call it, whether that's, looking at your strategy and adopting like kind of red teaming concepts, or that's coming in and saying, I don't think my organizational, I don't think we're certainly not hitting stuff on time, on budget, things like that. Or when things land, I'm never sure what we actually get at the end. Did we hit the target? Did we not hit the target? You'll see these things. They're going to be completely obvious for the most part. Just trust your intuition and then call somebody in that can basically sort of diagnose it, basically front end to back end, and then set you up with some options. It's also easier for you that way too, not basically water carrying for our industry here. Yeah. But what that helps you do too is it sort of separates the action and your relationships from what you actually do next too. It gives you that sort of the fourth leg of the problem, right? So your table actually stands up. It's like, well, is an industry expected opinion, so on and so forth, right? So, you can kind of get that too. But to be able to do that, that's what I would really say.
Well, that's a good segue. How would a CEO or anybody who's joined us here and is listening get a hold of you? And what would you like everybody to know about?
Yeah, I mean, if I was maybe a little bit more diligent, I'd have a website or something. But, unfortunately, I don't. Anyway, I call myself out on that. Can't be honest with yourself. Who can you be honest with? So, but you can always find me on LinkedIn. You can go find Mark Hill on LinkedIn, and you can certainly message me. And I think that's probably the best way to reach out if you want to talk, chat about what's going on.
Any cool projects coming up?
Yeah, a couple of different things. I have challenged myself. A lot of what we talked about today, economic decision-making cycle, which is like the 80-20 of your operating model, the most important part, the different layers of the org design. I see consultants fumbling through this stuff all the time. And it's like they'll know like 30%, 20%, 15%, and then throw a Hail Mary and hope that connects, right? And so there's a lot of people out there doing really honest work, but like really can't sort of connect all the pieces. So I've challenged myself over the next, maybe 2 years is too long, maybe I'm a weak goal setter, but over the next 2 years to write a book to basically go back and take all of this and say, how does all this really function? Like, how do you really think about the design of your organization end to end, and cover a lot of the topics that we sort of talked about today? Because I think it's a missing piece. I can't find any literature on it. I don't know what it is, so I think it's a gap.
Well, you've been listening to, you being all of you who have joined us, to the Hidden Chasm podcast. Thank you, Mark, so much. You should reach out to Mark if you're facing some of these issues or just interested in chatting with him. You can find him on LinkedIn, as he said, or you can reach out through us. You can reach us at hiddenchasm.com and get in line for Mark's book. I know I'll be in line. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Mark. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you all.